Greetings and welcome to Creative Briefing, an ad hoc live stream show that explores the many aspects of creativity and what it means to be creative, and how I can help you or show you or inspire you to explore your own creativity in whatever form you decide to follow. Whether you're a creative in one arena and want to explore something else, or whether you're someone who don't think they're creative at all, which is simply not true. Everyone has creativity in them, and we can all find ways to express ourselves. So I'm in digital tools again today. I'm in Adobe After Effects, and we're going to be looking at some of the built-in text animators that can bring some of your text to life in fun and creative ways. I'm going to do a brief overview of the text animators. They're a very, very deep subject, and I will get into more of some of the nuances in later episodes. But today I'm just going to sort of try and cover everything, sort of paint it with a broad stroke, so you get a good idea of what it can do. So let me let's see. So After Effects is a very, very powerful tool. It can do everything from motion graphics, visual effects, compositing, particles, water, fire, simple character animations, complex character animations. I mean, you name it. It is a very powerful tool. It's a very strong plug-in architecture with a really vibrant plug-in developer community. So it's been around a long time. It's very mature, and it can do a lot. So the text animators are really just a tip of one iceberg within After Effects. Obviously, it integrates really well with other Adobe tools, Photoshop and Illustrator, for example, and it's probably my favorite program to play around in, to work in. And at Influxx we do a lot of motion graphics, and it is kind of how I earn my crust, After Effects. So I'm naturally biased towards it. If you have the Adobe suite and you maybe haven't explored it yet, dip your toe in the After Effects water and play around with some text as a good starting point. So let's take a look at what we have. So this is the After Effects window. We have the project and the effect tabs up here. This is how I've set up my single monitor display workspace. You have a number of workspaces here, and you can really customize this workspace as you like. Down here is the timeline where you do your animation, and this is the display, the main window of your content. So to create some text, you just click on this little are we getting the cursor up here? No, you're not getting the cursor. So up at the top there is the text icon, or you can hit Command T, and that will bring up the text cursor. And there are some options for that. Let's see. Oh, keyboard shortcut. If you hit the apostrophe double quotes key, that brings up the guides, and then you can click close to where the center crosshair is. You click there and double check our paragraph is set to center alignment. That way we know we're going to create text that is going to be originated in the center of the screen and be equally balanced. So let's see. I'm an animator, or if I could get that in there. Alright, there we go. So hit enter. We have our text, and that automatically creates a layer here in the timeline where we have the ability to do our animations. Keyframes will be added to this layer. If I twirl down the arrow, then twirl down the text arrow, and you can see we have some options. I won't get into these right now. They're like I say, it's a very deep tool. There's lots that it can do. The first thing I want to do is just look at, when you install After Effects, there are a number of presets for all kinds of objects and possibilities, text being one of them. So if we go to animation and browse presets, this will bring up bridge, and you can see that. So if I go down to presets, and you can see there's presets for all kinds of backgrounds, behaviors, images, transforms, all kinds of stuff like that, transitions. If I go into the text folder, and then you can see there are different types of text animators. So there's a number of presets that you can apply and explore and use them. Some of them are usable, a lot of them are fairly corny, but they might be a good starting point for modification, or at least for you to look at, reverse engineer, to get an understanding of how the text animators and behaviors work. So let's just pick like animate in folder, and if you click on this, you can see it gives you a little preview down here. I'm going to make that preview a little, oops, no, that's not going to make that any bigger. Okay, so you can see that you get this preview of all of these things are just done within the text layer with the built-in text animators. There's no plugins, there's no added anything else other than what is built into the text engine. So you can see it's quite sophisticated, very deep, and gives you lots of possibilities. So let's just do a random fade up. Yeah, let's just do a random fade up and take a look at that. So if I do that, double click it, automatically adds that preset to the text layer. And you can see there's a couple of keyframes been added here, and if we just scrub through the timeline, you can see random letters fade up. If we click through a time, it takes about 3 or 4 frames for each character, one at a time, to animate their opacity, to fade up. So we have this animator 1 set of parameters that have been added to the text layer. So if we twirl that down, we can see we have a range selector and the property that is being animated. Now it's set to 0%. That is the from value. It's animating from to the whatever. If we turn this off, it's set to whatever that is, and that is defined by the transform. So the opacity is set to 100, so it's going to be animating from 0% opacity here to 100% opacity here. That's how that works. This is the from value. So when you're doing stuff, bear that in mind, that this is the from value. It's animating from this to whatever. Or you could look at it in reverse. It's animating to that. If we have maybe if the sequence of keyframes is in reverse, you could be saying, oh, animating from 100% to 0. But that is the two values that are in play here. If this was set to, say, 43%, it would be animating from 0 to 43, and it wouldn't go over or above that in most circumstances. So let's return that to 100. This is also, I can set this to any value. I can make this, go from 53 to 100. So if we scrub through this, it's really just sort of flickering. Let's set that to 0 and explore the range selector. Is that, I'm not sure how clear that is on the live stream. I know the video on the live stream sometimes can get kind of fuzzy. Hopefully you can see enough here to explore and play along at home. So you can see that the preset has added keyframes on the start value from 0 to 100. So the start value is the start of where on the object we're talking about, which is a line of text, where it begins. So if we look at the window here, around here and around here, you can see there is two red lines, one with an arrow pointing in, one with an arrow pointing in from opposite directions. So you've got two arrows pointing in and two red lines, and that's showing this is the start point from which we will begin our animation. This is the end point. So we're saying at the start is at 0%, which means no characters are selected, and then at 100%, as that you can see that red marker moving across, and that's saying these characters are slowly being selected. So that's one way of animating. So I'll get into what the selectors do in a moment. We're just reverse engineering this random fade up preset. So what makes that work is this property here, which is the randomize order. So if we turn this off, you can see it just fades up one character in linear sequence. We turn randomize on, and it's going to ignore where that red marker is and just select a random character from that string. Let's talk about the selection process. So in the advanced settings here, the units are either a percentage or an index. The index says each character has a numerical value. So the first, now maybe the first one is, so you can see it changes. If you look at the start and end, those are now changing. It went from percentages from 0 to 100 to the index from 0 to 13. There are 13 characters in that string, so we can get maybe greater control if we want. For example, if we wanted to animate a line of words coming on, we could say this word, which is word 1, comes on, and then word 2 comes on, word 3. We could have greater control of the timing of that. Percentages is a bit of a wild guess, but it's very quick and very easy to go from 0 to 100 without having to calculate absolute numbers. So index gives us the ability to be a bit more accurate with that. So percentage is generally useful, but we can use index. That's there as well. The range selector, these parameters are all specific to the range selector. This is the advanced properties of the range selector. So I should define what the range selector is at this point before we get any further. Range selector, so a range, it's selecting a range of characters within that string, and you have control over, what range in that string is selected. Like I say, from 0 to 100, or we can get into some other properties, but you're really defining a range as a sort of linear block within that string. The random order juggles that a little bit, but the actual range, as we saw, if you have the random order on, you can see that the range is from here, which is the start, to here, which is the end, but the randomized order is juggling that about a little bit. So there's some clever behind-the-scenes programming going on. So that's what the range selector does. You're selecting a range of characters within that string. You can have that selection based on the characters excluding spaces, or the characters including the spaces. So we have characters excluding spaces. So if you don't want the space between two words to count as a, time to fade up a character, then in most cases characters excluding spaces is the most useful. Also, we have words, so I can now fade up a word at a time. And if you have a big paragraph of words, that can be really cool. You have words sort of fading up we also have lines. Again, if you have a paragraph block, you can have each word, each line of text fade up one after another. So let's put that back to that. The mode is, especially as you get to stack these animators, the output is a value, say a percentage, 48% opacity, or one of the other properties, 400 pixels on the x-axis. As you apply these selectors, you can stack them. You can either add or subtract, intersect, min and max, and difference have some other fairly deep mathematical algorithms that, and I won't get into those right now, but you do have some control. Add is normally the one you'll be using, especially if you're only using one animator or one selector at a time. But just know that as you stack them, you want to control things happening, like creating waves or ripples. You can add and subtract at different rates through this mode property. The amount allows you to dial back if it's too much. I can dial that back. Say if I didn't want to go to completely 0% of overall, all of the stuff I've added, color changes or blurs or whatever I've added, I can dial those back a little bit if it all starts to get a bit much. So you can see now that this is just animating from not completely transparent to fully opaque. So that's the amount. Then we have the shape. Now the shape isn't really referring to any real shape of the text. What the shape is talking about is the wave or the graph that determines when each character or line or word, whatever the based on property is set to, when that next indexed, when that next character, when that next one, whatever it is, begins its animation. So square is a square wave. So you have square and the graph just goes straight up. So you when character 1 finishes its animation from 0 to 100%, then the next one can begin. There's no overlap. It's just this, then this, then this. If we look at each character's 0 to 100% or whatever the values may be, each one will be this much, then it's done. Then the graph is, almost sort of stair-stepped, because it'd be going that, then that, then that. Now we have ramp up, which means that it introduces some overlap, so that the overall animation ramp is an angle, so there will be some overlap as one is still going, the next one, and you can see that here. If we start at the beginning, because we have ramp up, there's overlap introduced. Now I'm no longer starting from 0, because that ramp, for whatever reason, whatever the algorithm is that is controlling this, it doesn't start from 0. The ramp is maybe starting from somewhere in the middle of that ramped graph. But you can see that it's a much smoother animation. It's a little more elegant. It's less abrupt. That it flows a bit nicer. But of course, the problem is we have to solve the not starting from 0, and we will get to that. So there's ramp up. There's also ramp down, which means we start from opaque and we fade out to, now the graph is fading out from 100 to 0, and each character, each index has its own downward ramp, and there is like a if you imagine like what they call a sawtooth wave, that is like that sort of shape. Each one is overlapping those those downward ramps. So you can kind of see that as we start here. If we look at the A and the N in an, and that A starts fading out, and then the N is starting to fade out. So Then we have some fun ones. We have triangle. Now what triangle does, if you imagine the graph, it animates down and then it animates back up again. So if we start from the end again, because it's got a ramp to it, the algorithm doesn't want to start from 0. I don't know why. It's not really annoying for me anymore because I'm used to the way it works, and I've got a workflow which I will share in a moment. But I think it could probably put a lot of people off if they want to apply a ramp or they want to get some soft flowing text animation, and the only way they can start from 0 and go to 100 is with the square shape. So it's a little bit unintuitive and a little bit confusing for new users. So I think that might put a lot of people off, but I'll show you the way around that. So triangle. Random order is not helping with this. I'm going to turn the random order off and you can kind of see what's going on. So we're starting, you can kind of see how it's moving from left to right. So it's animating down and then it's animating back up again. So what you have is this character will come out in visibility because we're dealing with opacity here. This character will go down, then this character will go down as this comes back up, and so on and so forth. So as it cascades, you've got this sort of ripple almost that flows through the. So that's kind of cool. But again, there's a little overlap because we're still dealing with a ramp. But the ramp goes down and it goes back up again. So the character goes opaque, or to transparent to opaque, and it's just a linear motion, if that makes sense. I know we're talking about shapes that are in an abstract form, but so round takes that triangle shape and it makes it a round triangle. So what that in effect does, as we get to the bottom of the triangle, it slowly slows the rate at which it's almost like easing. It's almost like built-in easing. As it gets to the bottom of its fade to whatever value, in this case 0 opacity, it starts to slow down, and then it will slowly go back up again at the angle of the triangle. So it's a less abrupt down then up. It's down, then it will slow, then go back up. So it's got some built-in easing. And the smooth shape, it's more like a sine wave. At that point, you've taken the triangle wave and you're making it into a sine wave where it's a continuous smooth flow rather than just having a linear downward slope until it gets to the bottom and it rounds off and softens that transition from down to up. Now you've got a complete S wave, a sine wave that is just flowing from one to the other. So if we see that, you can see that it's a lot smoother with the smooth shape. Next up we have ease high and ease low. Again, these are not very intuitive. I'm not sure why Adobe programmed these like this. It should be ease in and ease out. And also you can do positive and negative values. So these are fun to play with. I would say that you want to have the total of them add up to no more than 100. Which means if one is 50, the other should be 50. So it's hard to really see with just opacity, but it adds to the natural. Let's put that back from smooth to square. And again, it's hard to. Maybe I'll change the property from. I'll do a ramp up. I'm going to change this opacity. Actually, I'm not going to change it. I'm just going to add. So here's what's really cool about the text animation engine. So we added that preset. So I'm just going to delete that preset for now. and we explored what the preset browser does, and we can bring it into, we can double click to apply that to our text layer, and then we can sort of look at it and change parameters, use it as a starting point to customize. Let's start from scratch. We have our text layer, and now we can either go to animation, and yes, here's where we add our presets, or we go to animate text. Then we can animate one of these properties, and we can add a selector. It's pointless going to a menu when we have the menu right here next to the text layer. So we can animate the opacity, which we were just doing, and I'm going to set the opacity to 0, and because that's, again, that's the from, we're animating from 0, we want it to go to 100 to fade in. I'm also going to add a property, so now we've got this animator 1, which incidentally we can rename if we hit return. Just like everything else in After Effects, if you hit return, we're able to rename it. So I'm going to call this let's animate. You can call it anything. You should name it something that means, especially as you get to stack the animators, you should name them something relevant so that you know what it is at a glance. Also, a little trick I like to do as well, I have these systems, you know, I'm kind of, my OCD forces me to have these systems that allow me to declutter and focus, and one of those is if I put an equals at the start of my animators, because we have these path options and more options. At a glance, I want to see which one is my animator, especially when I rename it, because now it doesn't say animator 1 or animator 2. Now I've renamed it, it kind of blurs in. So if I rename that equals or dash or asterisk or whatever I want to precede my text label, it tells me immediately, oh, that's my animator, and I can see exactly visually without having to sort of spend a second or a fraction of a second. It's all about efficiencies, right? So I've called this let's animate. Now, attached to this animator, I can now add other properties, as I said. So let's do a position, just so that will help us see more visually the ramping I was talking about. So if I twirl down the range selector and twirl down the advanced, so before we had animated the start, the preset had animated the start parameter from 0 to 100, and we can do that. The offset function is really cool too, because that enables us to start from 0 and get into negative, so we can control the back and forth, or wiping in from, you know, right to left should we want to. There are several ways to achieve that, but the offset is really cool. How I personally use the offset, and I haven't seen anyone else do this, and all the text animation After Effects tutorials I've seen out there, I've seen no one that works this way, and I found this very specifically super helpful and super accurate, and this is how I do it. I'll set the end to, let's say, something like 33%. And it could be anything that's less than 100. Then I set the offset to negative 33. And of course, I need to set ramp up as my shape. The square shape just does everything in a linear fashion. So there you can just animate the start or the end. That works just fine. But once we get into the ramp, as we saw earlier, when you set the, let me revisit that. If I set that back to 100 and set this to 0, you can see we start with the animation half complete. Now I can bring the offset down. A lot of people just say, I'll start with the offset at -100. So what happens now, as you can see, we get to around 0. What happens when we get to around 0 offset, it's animated the end point, so everything's slightly in. Then as we go from the offset to +100, it brings the start in. So if you look at the red marker, you can see. So it's quite smooth and fluid, but it also takes a lot of time, and you're not really animating that range as I prefer it. So if I add, so we've got ramp up, so I'll set that to 33 and set my offset to -33. Now my start and finish points are together at the beginning as I want them to, and as I move the offset, you can see that you see those 2 red characters. You can see them there, the 2 red indicators. That now I'm moving that. It enables the animation to be a bit more snappy, and I don't have this situation where the beginning is fully opaque and the end is just starting to come in. I'm really controlling the width, and so the 33%, if I wanted that window of where we're going from 0 to 100, that's what this technique allows you to control. The lower the number, the narrower the window. And this side of the window is already at 100%. This side of the window is at 0%. And as we move that, we have this ramp. So we're able to control when it's just 0 to 100, there is no window. It's just ramping up continually. So I hope that makes sense. It's hard to visualize these abstract concepts, but if you look at the red markers, and as I sweep through the offset, you can see what I'm talking about. Here is already at 100. This window here is where it's going from 0 to 100, and this is still transparent. Oh dear. Okay. I think one of these days I'm going to start drinking wine with these live streams. Anyway, so I'm going to put that back to 33. Now I'm going to put that to -33, and I'm going to animate this. Do over 4 seconds. Now I'm going to put that to 100. So now I have this animation that slides that window of transition across my string. Let's add some easing. And again, I tend to do 33 and 33 because that's similar properties to the stock easing. If you apply, ease in. If you're familiar with After Effects, I won't get too deep into it now, but that is the rate of acceleration. That's really what we're talking about with the easing. So I tend to stick with those because they're general and they work well, unless I'm going for a specific snappy bounce or a specific soft smooth. But you can see now that there is overlap, and we won't see this with opacity. Let's again go to the position. If you see down here, I can scrub left or right, and that is going to animate. So my Y property is 76. It's animating from 76 to 0, internal to the text layer, not its comp space on the stage, just within the text layer to its baseline. So as I scrub across, you can see that as it fades in, it's moving slowly, then it speeds up a bit, and then it slows down. So it's slowly accelerating out of its resting point, accelerating, and then slowly slowing down, decelerating to its final resting point. And that adds some nice subtle softness to so if I just that illustrates the range selector and the ramping. Let's do one more. I'm going to add a rotation. So the rotation, let's go back to somewhere between our beginning and end, and you can see if I rotate it. Now if you look closely, if I zoom in here, you can see the little red X beneath each character, even the spaces. That is each character's anchor point specific to this string of text. So, and not to the layer's anchor point, which is in like comp space, in world space. So to the specific to the text object, each character has, now let's see, there we go. So if I select the position, now if you select one of the properties that we're animating, those little red X's that are showing us where the anchor point is. So what we can do, if we go up to this more options, we now have anchor point grouping. Now this is really cool because it allows us to outside of whatever is being animated in the, we've got this grouping based on characters excluding spaces and lines and words. Outside of that, we can group how things are transformed with the text animator. So if we look at the grouping alignment, now if I select that position again so we can see this, if I change this grouping alignment, you can see now I'm changing the anchor point. So if I change the anchor point down here, where that character now rotates, it will rotate down here, as opposed to it rotating here on its own baseline. Now it's rotating down here, which means it's going to have a much wider arc, which can create some really interesting stuff. So if we look at that, you can see, actually if I zoom back out again, as these characters animate in, they're rotating around that, and their position is animating, but they're also rotating, which gives them this big swooping. Now let's set this back to 0, and that changes how they rotate. The rotation is much tighter. They're rotating on their own baseline. Now what we can do, I can move that anchor point more to the center of the character, so that now it really spins on its own axis. So that just gives us just an extra layer of level of control. What's really cool is now, like I said, I can change that from a character-based anchor point. Let's try the word-based anchor point. Now you can see, if we zoom in again, the anchor point is in the middle of the word animator. The anchor point is in the middle of the word and middle of word I'm. So now those individual character rotations are still going to rotate one at a time and not rotating the whole word at a time. We could do that by selecting word, and that would look like that. But if we just want to animate each character at a time, but it's anchored to the same place on each word, check how this looks. Look at, so you get a very interesting motion that would be really hard to keyframe, really hard to do manually. And there's a lot of trial and error with this because the function is so deep. There's such a lot you can do with it. You can't possibly know how every outcome is going to work with every, so there's a lot of trial and error to explore effects and stylizations. So if we change that to line, now the anchor point is in the middle, and the characters on this side of the animation of the string are going to be anchored. The rotation is doing this, and it's anchored down here. So the characters on this side are coming in this way, or the characters on this side are coming up this way, because the anchor point, they share a common anchor point, which is defined by the line. And this is really cool. So if we just preview that. This would be really, really hard, really time consuming and laborious to do by hand. So the text animator is really, really cool, gives us all these options to play with. So I'm going to go back to character for now, and I'm going to leave that at the center, that's fine. Fill and stroke. Okay, so let's look at these options. All fills over all strokes. Per character palette, yeah, that obviously each character is its own. Let's see, we can illustrate this. Let's look at the, so if we have white, that's fine, and then we'll give it a what color outline, what color stroke should we give it? Let's give it a nice bright yellow, nice fiery yellow, and let's bump that stroke up to, let's see what the 5 pixels. Okay, so much like Illustrator allows us to anchor the strokes, After Effects doesn't have that level of depth, but what we can do is go from all fills over all strokes to all strokes over fills. So that's almost like the stroke is now 5 pixels, and it's eating into the stroke. It's like putting the stroke on top of as a separate layer on top of the fill. If we go to all fills over all strokes, now the stroke might be less thick, less depth, but it's not eating into the actual natural weight or body of the character. So we can then play with expanding that, but the actual weight of the character doesn't get met. I'm not sure what use all strokes over fills is, because it only ever looks garbage. All fills over all strokes is the one I use most commonly. If you do fill over stroke, then that's like the per character, because then each character is next, and then its stroke might eat into the stroke so thick it's hard to really tell. But usually the first character will have a stroke, then the second character will come up, and its stroke then takes precedent. So there's like a hierarchy based on the characters, rather than the hierarchy is all the strokes at the back and all the fills are on top. All fills over all strokes. In 99% of cases, I can't ever think of a time I haven't used that when I'm dealing with text and stroking. So I like to stroke the text. So let's take a look at that and how this affects the text animator. So all fills over all strokes. If we look at the per character palette, then you can see with this, A, as it comes up over the N, the A has its own fill and stroke properties. The N is behind it. If I set this to all fills over strokes, now it behaves differently. You can still see that if we do all strokes over fills, yeah, that looks terrible, as predictably. But the per character palette and everything, even when we get into 3D, and I'll do that and do a whole thing on the 3D properties of this text animator, but each character has its own little world it lives in. So we set that per character palette. We can, sometimes that might get a bit messy and we have to sacrifice some look like this. You can see there's a little bit of where it's fading in. In here we've got like this stroke in the middle until it gets fully opaque. But and that's due to the fill being semi-transparent and the stroke behind it semi-transparent, so you get this blending. However, inter-character blending, now we can play with that a little bit. If we add that to add, you can see down here where these two characters are overlapping each other, that especially when they're definitely, as they get closer to fully opaque, you don't really notice it that much. And if the tracking were, let's see if I bring the tracking a little closer, maybe just for the moment, you can see where the N overlaps the I. Let's go back to where we see the N, and you can see the A and the N overlapping here. The inter-character blending, we have the ability to change their blending mode and how they interact with each other on a color level. So let's play with some of those overlay. If we take a look at what's going on right about here, let's see difference. It's not doing too much. Let's put it back to per character and maybe, okay, so here we can see where the A is overlapping the N, and it's the blending mode inside of the text engine is set to difference. We can see how the A overlaps the N and the color changes. If we change that back to add, it should blow out to white and bright yellow. You can see there predictably. If we do multiply, now it gets really rich. Try one more. Yeah, okay, so with white and yellow we're not going to get too much interesting. I'm just going to leave that at add, and I'm going to set this back to 0 and zoom back out again so we can see it just adds a little. Right now, because the character strokes are overlapping, I'm actually going to set that back to normal, and then that's more likely, more like it. So okay, so I'm going to turn off this grid because it's kind of distracting, and it looks like each successive character falls in behind the preceding one. If we put all fills over strokes again, it's not quite as attractive, because like I say, we have the semi-transparent, semi-opaque fill over the stroke. So in this case, when we're dealing with strokes, I think the per character option might work. So those are the more options. That's outside of the text animator, but it's part of the text engine, and obviously it has an effect on what we're doing. So we've explored the range selector. I think we've done everything. We've got the randomize order, we can turn that on, and now we can see things fall in, and obviously some parameters lend themselves to randomization better than others. That's the range selector. So as I said, we can stack not only animators, I can add another animator, and let's say scale. Now I have a second animator. I have this one called Let's Animate, and I can do this one, Let's Scale. And then we can do the similar sort of thing. Let's set it to 33 again. Although so we can have maybe a different timing. Obviously these two keyframes here are what define the text animation for the range selector, or for the first animator. Let's maybe these. So now I've got these keyframes that are offset. So everything's. It adds a little wave at the end because I have this other range selector that's selecting a small chunk that is going to, let's see what, that's only the square wave again. So it's not ramping up, it's just sort of blowing up temporarily, then blowing back down. But for kind of an 8-bit effect, that could be kind of fun. Let's see what it animates like. Just do a quick RAM preview. Okay, so that's actually, it's a little slow. So overall, I'm going to hit U to bring up my keyframes. I'm just going to drag these and bring this down. I'm going to hit my N for my timing, for my preview timing right there. So let's see, with a little snappier. So that is how we can stack animators. And if we just want to preview, just say we don't want to see this one for a second, we can disable that by turning that off. So that's cool. We can stack any number of them and do all kinds of different timings and different, can create waves and bounces, and that's another topic for another show. Also, within each animator, we can also add another selector. We've got these three. We've got a range selector, which I described. We have a wiggly selector, and it's going to operate on the same properties, the position, rotation, and opacity. But what the wiggly selector does, it's like a pseudo-random, it's a built-in pseudo-random operator. So if you're familiar with After Effects at all, you'll know that there is the wiggler, and that operates on keyframes, and you choose a time setting like every 2 seconds, every half a second, every 5 seconds, whatever you want it to be, and a window of like parameter change. So if we're talking about opacity, if something is set at 50% and you set a window of 10, it will then wiggle over the set amount of times between 10% above 50, which is 60, and 10% below 50, which is 40. So it will wiggle randomly, pseudo-randomly, from 40 to 60%, over the specified amount, really quick, like in every half a second, or very slowly over 5 seconds. So that's what the wiggler does. Now the same property, if I just show you something real quick, if I just look at, say, the transform properties to the layer, not to the text engine, if I option click on the scale, that allows us to add an expression to the, you can see we have this expression here, and it's based on JavaScript. It's a scripting language. It's like code. It's controlling properties and parameters via code, which allows us to automate things. It allows us to do things that will again be very time consuming or labor intensive or impossible to do otherwise. So, and there is a whole library of stuff which we'll get into in a second, all these built-in functions and methods for using expressions. But one of the built-in ones is the wiggle function, which does encode what the wiggler, which has been around for a long time, and has been operating on keyframes. Much less so now because we can do it with code, and it's probably a little more efficient and non-destructive when you're adding keyframes and wiggling. That way it's a bit, I'm not say permanent because you can always undo stuff, but it's a bit more, I think, user-friendly doing it in code because it's less clutter with keyframes and less less doing and undoing. It's easier to edit and manipulate. Anyway, so the wiggle, you just add the code wiggle and then the time in seconds. So every 1 second, comma, I want it to change 12%. And I do that, and now if I say disable the text animator real quick, you can see every second I'm changing the scale 12%, but it's doing the X scale and the Y scale separately. So just with one very, very short line of code, I'm animating an object that would take me forever to get that sort of randomness. So really, really useful. That's what the wiggler does. So the wiggly selector acts much the same way, just within the text engine. So now I have this range selector, and you know, when we stack these selectors, they're cumulative. You're either adding or subtracting, like I said earlier. So if we look at the wiggle selector, we've got these different modes. This is the default. So let's explore this real quick. That's pretty cool. Again, would take forever to do that. Not only is it time consuming, but using the brain power to go, oh, that one should be rotated 12 degrees that way, and that should be up there, but maybe 14 degrees that way. I mean, that's brain power that's better spent being creative, right? And these tools help us do this complex, laborious stuff. So the wiggle selector, if I turn the range selector off, now it's just going to wiggle continuously. It's just wiggling the position, the rotation, and the opacity in this pseudo-random manner. And the random seed determines, you know, if you don't like one look, you can play with the random seed, and the math random algorithm behind the scenes just applies very, very quickly, immediately, a different set of parameters. So lock dimensions. That means that if we're doing stuff in scaling, you don't get that sort of rubbery. It's changing the X value different to the Y value. Everything's, you know, 120% in scale is 120% uniformly, rather than 120% this way and 90 this way, and you get that sort of rubbery look. So now we've just got some bouncing, and I like how the apostrophe is sort of bouncing away from the I, its own character. Anyway, so lock dimensions is useful for getting things a bit more uniform, and it definitely really applies when we're dealing with scale. Sometimes you want the rubbery look, in which case you want to turn lock dimensions off. Now, temporal phase and spatial phase. Earlier we talked about sine waves and sawtooth waves. You can adjust the phase by, if you imagine 0 on the graph is here, and then 0 is on this line is here, and then we go up and we go down, we go from 0 to 100, or 0 to the property, and, you know, beginning property. And so, like, we can begin the phase from up here if we change the phase, say, to 180, and that will change. This is really, really meta minutia, getting into the weeds of this. I can't think of a time I've used the temporal phase or the spatial phase. It allows us to control where on the wave we're beginning the animation. There are obviously uses for it. I've never got that deep into the weeds. Just know that it's there. and that's what it's talking about. You could start at 90 degrees. When we're talking about degrees, it's really linear. When you're looking at a wave, it's, you know, going in a linear fashion. But if starting here is 0 and then going, not the degrees like a circle per se. It's more like we're starting here at 0, we're progressing through our wave, and we're coming back to 0 again. And that is like that's the cycle. So, which is why it's 0 degrees. So, just know that that is there. It gives you just another layer of controllability. So the spatial phase talks about where they are in space, and the temporal talks about where the graph is in time. So again, that is really getting into the minutiae there for that level of control. Correlation. Now I know I'm going up the list here. I should have really have gone down the list in sequence, but I'm going up the list. So just take a wacky ride. Correlation. How to explain correlation? So we talked about in the range selector narrowing that window and then moving that window across the string. With the wiggler, the lower the correlation number, you are then selecting one character at a time, and it will wiggle those in sequence. With 100% correlation, you're selecting all of the characters and you're wiggling the unit as a whole. And 50%, now you're wiggling, that window is now wiggling. So that's what correlation does. So if we bring the correlation all the way down, with this set of parameters, we can't really... Let me delete position, rotation, and let's add blur, everyone's favorite, and let's add a color property, fill color, saturation. So we're going to hypersaturate it, and we're going to blur it. Okay, so you can see it's wiggling, but wiggling means it's sort of pseudo randomizing between those numbers, and we those numbers are 0% opacity, 100% saturation, and 36% of blur. Those are the numbers we're wiggling. Now, we're wiggling 100% to negative 100%. That's how much effect we're having on each character. 100% of 0%. We're going all the way to 0%. And then we negative, if we put this at 0, it's not really, none of these characters, we don't get to 0% of 0%, if that makes any sense. You would think that 0% of 0% would be 100%, because 0% means I'm having 0 effect to get to 0%. But unfortunately that 0% is never quite the case. So this minimum amount, I always find I have to trial and error. Sometimes I got to scrub more. So if I scrub down to around 30, you can see now I've got some fully opaque, and fully opaque, I mean 0%, 0 opacity. So now we're getting into double negatives, and again talking in abstract terms here. But that's what the minimum amount does. I find that going all the way to negative 100 is often too much. it doesn't give enough variability. So if I find somewhere between, 50% is usually a good starting point, and I can see that I've got enough there where this is just not opaque enough, so I bring it down a little bit so these are clearly opaque. And so with the correlation at 0, each character is going through this character, this character, this character. The others are still sort of blurred, and I'm sort of pseudo randomly bringing each character in with a little overlap. Okay, and that's a cool effect. Sometimes that's really needed. Let's bring the correlation up to 100%. Now you can see 100% means I'm using 100% of the characters. I'm affecting 100% of the thing at the same time, and I'm wiggling it. This now is acting like I've applied the wiggler to the whole layer, because I'm I'm wiggling those properties, the opacity, the color, and the blur on the whole. So correlation defaults to 50, but we can bring it down to make it more granular, or bring it somewhere up to around 60, where you're really doing large blocks at one time. So that's kind of what correlation does. Again, we have our based on characters without spaces, words. So if I wiggle the words, you can see that it's got a kind of a cool flickering. It's not nearly as useful as the characters, but let's say if I bring the should be more flickery if I'm having a low correlation number. So it's more flickery if I bring the correlation up closer to 100. There's going to be less difference, they're all going to be blurred at the same time, they're all going to be opaque at the same time. There's going to be less difference. When the correlation is on the lower side, there's going to be more difference, it can be more fractured. They're still wiggling independently as words, but they tend to come in and go out at the same time. That's what correlation does. So based on words, lines, characters. So let's set that back to that. Then we have the wiggles per second. This is where we affect the timing. We can make it really slow. I've only got 3 seconds, so let's make that say 3 seconds. So it's really only gonna wiggle very slowly. Each wiggle is going to take place over 3 seconds, each cycle through the wiggle. So I believe it's going to, every 3 seconds it will have animated each one of those characters. So they're going to, so 3 seconds divided by, what was it, 13 characters in this string, so that will tell you how many individual wiggles per cycle. Let's bring this down to say 0.5. So half a second, so it's going to be a lot quicker and a lot more jittery. Actually, that's wiggles per second. I misspoke. That was incorrect. It's the other way around. The less wiggles per second, the smoother it's going to be. The more wiggles per second, so if I do a 5 wiggles per second, it's going to be nice and slow. There's only 5 wiggles every second. No, I was right the first time. It is more jittery. Now I've confused myself. Yes, so the more wiggles per second, the more jittery it is. The first time I was incorrect, so it is right. The more wiggles per second, the more it's going to jiggle. There are every second that passes, each character is going to have wiggled 5 times. So, you know, if you put it up to a really high number, then it's going to be just spazzing out all over the place, which might be something that, you know, you're looking for. It's got a certain flickery look to it. If I bring that down to, again, 0.5, now we're only getting, you know, 1 wiggle every 2 seconds. So that's a much smoother, much more subtle transition. Wiggles per second. That's higher, more jittery, lower, smooth and subtle. I'm glad we got that worked out together. Glad I cleared it up for myself. So then we have the mode intersect. Again, we're adding these values that the wiggle selector is generating, and we're stacking it on top of the range selector. So if we put that back on, turn the wiggle selector off, this is blurring in a linear fashion. Let me change that to what was really nice. Let me change that to smooth, and that has that sawtooth look to it. So if we just preview that, it's got a little ripple that ripples through the text. What I would like to do is make that a bit smoother. So you can see the A and the M are slightly blurred, and the N is completely transparent. So if I bring the E's high up a little and the E's low down, I can get some softer, again, so I want to make sure they get up to around 100. That's kind of cool. Changing the mode to subtract with the smooth shape. Let's see. Yeah, I'm going to set that back to add. Okay, so adding the wiggler back in. So what intersect is doing, it says where the range selector has selected a range of characters, and actually, speaking of that range, what I'm going to do, I'm going to make this, let's make that 66. I'm going to increase the window a little bit. I'm going to make that -66. Just so the window is a little wider, that might smooth things out a little. So it's saying where the window that the range selector is giving us, intersect that with some wiggles. What we can do is either add to that, just add generally to the wiggle, so you can see that when we get to here, you can see that the range is moving across the characters, and overall everything is wiggling. we can subtract so that the range moves across, and then the wiggler is removing values from those characters. I like the add. I like what this does, but what I would like to do is let's see if I change the range selector from add to subtract. So if we turn off the wiggly selector for a moment, and we can see that this is just kind of shining a spotlight across those characters, and then we add the wiggle to it and it's randomly blurring some of those selected, so we get this kind of cool jittery spotlight of those characters. Very random, fairly glitchy. So let's add, I'm going to add the expression. Now we looked at expressions a moment ago, and I'm going to turn off both of these. The expression selector, the amount obviously is the amount of expression, the amount of values that the expression, that the math from the expression engine generates is going to be applied. We can again sort of fade that back. I only ever really use 100 for that. So the expression, as we looked at, has just hundreds of built-in functions. I'm going to add in so excuse me. If I bring this later in time, whoops. Okay. Let's turn this off a second again. Sorry about this, just figuring what I wanted to do out. So I'm going to write a variable, time minus in point. So t is a variable, it equals time minus the in point, which is here. And if you want to check what the in point is, you can put a expression in the source text and type in point, and that tells you my in point is 0.076, 0.76 blah blah blah. That tells me what my in point is, 0.76 of a second. So that's a cool little trick for testing your expression values. So t equals time minus the in point. So time is the current time in seconds. So for example, if I try that with my source text again, let's put time. I can see that throughout time, this is a great way to do text leaders and counters, so on. The text object, the source text, is now has the value of the time. So another little neat. So t equals time, which in this case is 1 point whatever seconds, minus the in point, which is 0.7 seconds. So that value is stored in the variable t. Variables are just little buckets we can store data in, whether strings or numbers. When we write an expression, we always finish with a semicolon. That tells the script that, hey, there's more to come. Go down to the next line and read. If I don't put that there, the script will break, and the script will be saying, hey, you're trying to tell me that t equals the time point, the amount, and that may be the value. It may look really odd. It may just give you an error that the expression doesn't work. So semicolon to the next line. I'm going to write another variable, v equals t, which was the variable we just established, times 50. So that's taking that time minus in point. So basically what we're doing with that is we're saying time is counting up, but I want to subtract the in point. That means that now here equals 0. So now I'm basically resetting the time counter. So time minus in point, I'm resetting. So I can't really, I could do that, but I won't bother right now. But just trust me that the variable t now equals 0. So 0 times, so the variable v is t times 50. So 50 times 0 is 0. But then we get to here, and now it's 1 times 50, which equals 50. So the variable v is incrementing starting from 0 here, if that makes sense. And then we put 100 minus v. That's basically saying 100% subtract v. So what that's going to do is it's going to apply the variable, the expression. It's going to apply the text animation engine, and it's going to fade out over time, so that we can start with something that's blurred and then over time it's going to fade in. That's what we get with the expression selector. We're able to apply all these things in the expression selector. Now we can do these things outside of the text engine, and that's fine. Probably wouldn't be much benefit to doing that on its own. We could apply those. We can apply those. We could apply those expressions to the opacity, to a color, and to a blur, and we're writing those expressions 3 times. The text engine, using the expression selector in the text engine, we do get the ability to apply those 3 properties, or dozen properties, however many we want, and with 1 line of code we can fade them all out at once. So that is pretty unique and pretty cool right there. But of course, as with these selectors, we can stack them. So we can add the wiggly, and nothing happens, and then it fades up, and the wiggles weren't working. Okay, that wasn't meant to work. Was meant to work. That wasn't meant to happen. So let's see what we're doing with based on characters, excluding things. Okay, so let me check my cheat sheet. I am wiggly selector was set to add. So I'm just checking my cheat sheet here, seeing where, and then arrange selector was add 5% smooth. So I've broken my tutorial. This was working earlier. So maybe the expression should go okay. I had them in the wrong order. The expression selector needs to go first, which is selecting how much goes over time. Then obviously over time, by the time it gets to here, the expression selector is saying no more values. Everything's zeroed out. So if I ran preview that, we get this very cool text intro that used a couple of keyframes and a couple of lines of code that would take a lot of work to do by hand. And the beauty is, obviously, I can change the speed at which it works. I can t times 50 now could be 100, and it will work a lot quicker. So that is the power of the text engine, the text animators. And all I've done today is look at the different selectors and how the selectors can stack and work together. Obviously we can stack animators. I've only looked at 2 or 3 of the properties. We can look at all the different other properties. There is a lot of depth in this text engine, and with a little digging and little getting to understand this sort of obtuse, unintuitive terminology, or some of the way that the things behave. Like, you would think that the expression that sets the overall would go last, but getting the stacking order right. And so, like I say, so I can then move this character. I don't have to worry about moving anything else. I can have this presentation going on, and I can then duplicate, these layers. Let's make and let's bring them apart in time. Let's bring this one down. Let's bring this one up. So make sure there's room to finish. Right, so I can have these 3 layers, and let's be a bit more sensible about this. Let's see, ID 10T animator. So now we have this proclamation. First one comes in. Second, oh, now thank you. The third one of those has just been proven true. So each line comes in on its own with its own source text. It's the same sort of parameters. I can move them around in time and it doesn't break the script because we have that time minus in point expression applied. Super useful, super powerful. What I can do now is scroll down that text, select these two. I didn't even use let's scale, so I can delete that. I can just select let's animate, go to animation, save animation preset, and I can call this film fade text, because it kind of reminds me of like old film noir stuff flickering in. You can call it whatever, obviously. So you can put this in your text presets in your folder, in which case it will be in your library. I have my own folder. I'm just going to save it onto the desktop for now. Now that preset exists and I can animation apply recent presets. I've got that in my library, so I can create a new comp. I can Command T, add some more text, and you know, it can be whatever. It can be a different document. Obviously, swapping and copying between documents isn't always easy with After Effects. I can apply this, move it down in time, and now boom, that cool thing I spent a little while creating, it's now reusable. I could even share it on the web if I was kind enough, and I may do that. I will put this preset so you can reverse engineer it. That's a great idea. I'll put that, and I'll put it on a link in a comment on the video thread, or if you're watching on YouTube, I'll put it on the in the description of the YouTube video. So that is that. This has gone on for, no, I didn't. Thank you, Apple. Come on. There we go. I do not want full screen. I never want full screen. Apple should know that by now. So I have been going an hour and 40. Oh, I'm very sorry. This usually runs around 35-45 minutes. Sometimes I run to an hour. Hour and 40. This is a long time. If you stuck with me this long, I hope it was worth it. I think I have shared some really cool information, some really cool tricks with this text animation engine, and some things that I haven't seen explained elsewhere. I've watched a lot of these text animation videos over the 10 years or so I've been using After Effects. So I haven't seen a lot of these explained, excuse me, to the depth. So I think you've got a great foundation to go and play with that text engine. It's super powerful, as I've said. I hope you've learned something. I hope you found it entertaining and useful. If so, do the social due diligence, like, subscribe, press buttons, smash buttons, as they're saying these days. It's no longer good enough just to like a button or like a video or give a thumbs up. You've got to smash it. Smash the thumbs up. Smash the subscribe. Ring the bell. Yes, it all gets a little bit exaggerated, doesn't it? It's all a bit too much. So do your social due diligence. You know what I've got to do. I'm over here, all these places. Say hi, wave, and ask any questions. If there's anything you didn't understand or anything didn't work out, comment. So otherwise, just go out there, be creative. I will see you tomorrow for some music, for some Friday fun. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next time.